Hi, everyone. Welcome to another webinar. This week in November of 2024, we'll be talking to Ben Wright from Wright Orthotics and Prosthetics. He has recently opened up a number of clinics in the Texas area, so we'll talk through that. And kind of in our journey of clinic ownership and starting independent clinics, I welcome anybody that's listening in to chime in, ask questions. And as I said, Ben has been around for a while, but he is just starting out. And so he'll share some of the things that it takes to start a clinic, some of the things that he's learned from his previous journeys. But before we jump into that, real quick about calibration marketing. I'm Linda Calabria. I've been in O&P for almost 9 years now, and have really enjoyed the industry. And I've seen this need for marketing, go-to-market strategy support from either smaller entities or entities that just need somebody to come in with O&P market knowledge and understanding and just hit the ground running and start to support these teams. It may be on a project basis, it may be ad hoc, it may be just part-time work that there's no bandwidth or financial ability to really bring on a full-time person, which is completely understandable. And sometimes it's not a full-time role that's needed. It's just a little bit of support for the team that's already existing. So you can learn more on calibration.marketing. That's the website. There's a slew of other documents that I've put up there and created for the O&P market. A lot of upper limb specific documents, but you can kind of peruse and reach out through there or connect with me on LinkedIn. But we will jump into meeting Ben Wright. Ben, good morning. Thanks for joining me.
You're so welcome.
Share a little bit about yourself, kind of your background before we jump into learning more about Wright O&P and how you got into the desire to start a new clinic. But if you could share a little bit about how you got into O&P as a whole, would be helpful for the audience.
Sure thing. And thanks again for having me on, Linda. So yeah, I got into the field because of, thankfully, a tour that I took when I was a Boy Scout. I grew up in Oregon, and a good friend of our family, he took our scout troop on a tour of his orthotics and prosthetics clinic. And at the time, I didn't think a whole lot about it. But then as I was thinking about what I wanted to do with my life later on, that tour came back to me. And so I gave him a call and asked him if, I asked him about the field more specifically, like, hey, like I'm thinking about doing this. What would it look like? And I asked him if I could do an internship with him for a summer, which I needed an internship for my undergraduate program anyway. So that ended up
that works out.
It was great. So yeah, my wife and I moved back to Oregon, did an internship, and I loved it. I loved it. So I finished up my undergraduate degree, and then I went to Baylor College of Medicine for my graduate degree. I did rotations. So at that point, the Baylor program, there were 6 rotations that we did. Each one was 3 months long.
Okay.
And so I did 6 of those. Let's see, 3 of them were in Houston, 2 in Utah, and 1 in Idaho. And yeah, it was fantastic. And so since then, I've worked at a couple different clinics, and here I am.
Here you are. It's quite the jump, and especially when you're early on in your career. Obviously, you've seen some things that you've liked. You've worked in a variety of different clinics, like you said, around the country, almost, you could say, in different locations. And then you were at Ottobock Care. So if you could kind of walk us through, some of the things that once you came out of Baylor, right? Some of the things that you experienced, good, bad, and different. We don't have to name names or anything like that, but some of the things that are driving your motivation to jump into independent clinic ownership.
So yeah, the first clinic I worked at was a private clinic. There were three clinics that were part of the group or the company,
Hmm.
and it was great. I loved it. Great people. I saw one of the things that is a big part of my practice. I don't know if have I slowed down a little bit, Linda. Oh,
It's
there we go.
okay. Eventually, it kind of works itself out. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things about my practice during my residency, I was able to kind of dip my toes a little bit into custom carbon fiber bracing.
Mm.
Um, and so coming out of school, and I got to do it enough that I got really passionate about it and really excited about it. So coming out of school, I wanted to work at a clinic that would allow me to do that, to
Okay.
provide that type of bracing. And
Okay.
so Del Bianco, prosthetics and orthotics, my first job, they were already kind of into that, which was
Mm.
really great. And so, not that custom carbon fiber bracing is the answer for every single patient, but in my clinical experience, it's a great option for more patients than we think.
Mm.
So, as far as big lessons that I've learned, I was there for about a year and a half, almost 2 years, and I was able to do a lot of carbon fiber bracing there. And so that was one of my big lessons is in lower limb orthotics. I was able to learn a lot
Yeah.
while I was there
Okay.
about that.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so that
Something
was
that
one
you've
thing.
carried over.
Yeah, yeah. And at the other clinics where I've worked, fortunately, as I've gone in, I've expressed my interest in that.
Hmm.
And fortunately, I've been able to provide that type of bracing at pretty much all the clinics I've worked at so far.
Okay.
So that was really great.
That's great. Yeah. No, definitely nice to keep doing the things you love, right? And there may be a bit of a lag, but we can hear you clearly. So, like, don't worry about that at all.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So, uh, how, when you were at Ottobock Care, how did kind of the transition? I know you were, coming in from a clinical perspective, obviously. What were some of the things that maybe you got to experience there on a manufacturer slash clinic side of things that maybe you hadn't seen previously that also formed your opinion of, how care should be
Sure.
provided? And I'm sure that there were some great learnings to take away from that experience as well.
Totally. Um, the other clinics that I had worked at were all either smaller clinics, or there was one mid-sized clinic that I worked at as well.
Okay.
So going from those to a much bigger institution was very different.
Yeah, I
The
believe it.
clinic that I worked at was very, how would I say, it's the nicest clinic I've ever worked at,
Mm.
and probably will ever work at, because it was inside Autobox headquarters,
Oh, nice.
and so they wanted to make sure that it looked good, and it does, and
Yep.
it's
The
fantastic.
belle
So
of the ball.
yes, so that was great. But as far as to get to your question, it was good to be able to see how the manufacturing side and kind of the sales team,
Mhm.
how we could team up with them. Um,
Yeah.
and but not in a bad way. So one thing I will say, while I was at Ottobock, I know that in the field there have been a lot of mixed feelings about
Sure.
manufacturers getting into clinical care here in the
Yep.
states, right? Which is I totally get. I totally get that. I will say though, at Ottobock, in my experience, I had little to no um, push to
Yeah.
provide Autobach components exclusively. I never really felt that.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that I took away that I really appreciated. That even
Mhm.
Autobach is now in, and other manufacturers are now in the clinical game.
Right.
In my opinion, and that should not affect how clinicians make their decisions.
Eh,
Um,
and when
and
you're
in
in,
my experience, it didn't.
yeah, and when you're at, I kind of saw that when I was at OSER as well, is that there is this, big, there's always speculations, but the message is always internally like, we don't want this to be something that's pushed on people. And yes, we have, great solutions and great products and, everybody works together, but it's not the be all and end all,
Right.
which is definitely reassuring. And it's great to hear from you as well on
Yeah.
that front.
So that was great. And when I decided to leave and start my own practice, um, eh, it was really funny because the people on the sales side, they were super stoked. I mean, they were like, "Yeah, that's great. Like
Awesome.
we're still going to be providing you components, and you'll still order from us, and
Yeah.
congratulations, and it'll be great." And even on the clinical side, I mean, the clinical side of Ottobock Care, they were also very supportive. We departed ways very amicably, and I think it went fairly well.
Yeah.
It was just kind of funny. Like when I told people there at headquarters I was leaving, so many of them were just very, very happy for me, very excited, and I appreciated that.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, we certainly need more clinics in the world. That's for sure. So how have the first, like, how long has it been since you left and are now officially seeing patients in your South Austin office? Because you've got a couple of offices, a few of them, which is not a small undertaking.
Sure.
So how has that transition been, and whatever, has it been like 6 months or so? Not even?
So I opened our first clinic in Bastrop, Texas, in the beginning of August.
Okay.
And then I brought on another clinician who works as a subcontractor, seeing patients
Gotcha.
for Wright orthotics and prosthetics. And so he came on end of September.
Okay.
So yeah, so we've been seeing patients here in the Bastrop clinic for, yeah, what is that, 3 months, 4 months?
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. Time flies.
and yeah, it does. And then our South Austin clinic, we just opened up, that was just last week. So
Okay.
I spend a couple days here in Bastrop, and a couple days there, and then the other clinician I work with, he does the same thing.
I mean, that's incredible. It's a huge undertaking from what I've heard from some others in the field of just, location almost sometimes is the easiest part. And then it's the, well, accreditation and all these different things. And I know you would share before we hopped on that, and I think that's how and why I reached out to you initially is, yes, podcasts, there's so many more of them now. And I'm so happy that there are, because I find myself tuning into our industry podcasts to learn more about what's going on from different parties. But you had shared at the way, way beginning, summertime-ish, that you were also interested in doing something similar and kind of sharing some of the learnings and takeaways from starting and opening up a new clinics. What is so far, what was, I guess, before you started seeing patients, what were some of the larger hurdles that you needed to overcome that maybe, you kind of knew about, but you didn't realize how tremendous they were? And then, like, what surprised you?
Sure. I would say things take time, and that's been a little challenging. So
Mm,
doing learning. So as far as time frame to get the operation up and going, obviously you have to find a space, right?
yeah.
And that's not especially difficult. I mean, we were able to find a space that's fairly affordable,
Yeah.
and it works. Ordering things for the space also not particularly
Hmm.
difficult. But getting accreditations for like Medicare,
Hmm.
ABC, and then being so I guess I'll back up. The thing that surprised me was the order of operations that you have to follow.
Mm,
So, and now granted, we operate in Texas,
yeah.
and Texas is a licensure state. Um,
Yeah.
I was already practicing in Texas, so I already had my Texas license,
Mm,
but we had to get state licensure for our clinic space. So that was
okay.
like step one. So first step is you have to get the space ready enough that you can get Texas state licensure.
Mm,
That went fairly quickly from the time we submitted. I think it took about 5 or 6 weeks.
okay.
And then after that was ABC. So ABC certification comes after that.
Okay.
And then once you get ABC certification, you have to get or accreditation certification, I don't know which one. And then you have to get Medicare accreditation. And one thing that was surprising is then so as far as getting our own insurance contracts,
Yeah.
then the number of insurance contracts you can't get unless you have Medicare is like significant.
Huh.
Like
Okay.
almost we could apply for almost I don't even know if we could apply for from what we found. Now this is not exhaustive
Yeah, yeah,
information.
yeah.
From our research, like we could only apply for like one or two insurance contracts without being accredited by Medicare and having our own.
Okay.
So that process, and so at this point, let's see. So we started August 6th, I think was our open date technically, and we're now at oh yeah, so we're at November. So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
August, September, October, November. So yeah, 4 months in, we have Texas licensure, we have ABC accreditation, and we just had our site visit from Medicare, and we now are Medicare accredited as well. So
Oh,
after 4 months, we have all three of those now.
that's amazing.
And only now can we actually apply for most other private contracts, with some of the
Mm,
bigger insurance providers. So just that was fairly surprising. I mean,
yeah,
I didn't really appreciate the amount of time that took and that type of thing.
sure. Well, happy open versary.
Thank you.
Nice 4 month even ring to it. So you
Yes.
you have to celebrate.
Yes, indeed.
Um, that's yeah. So I since let's take the Bastrop facility first because it's been around for a little bit longer. Um, what are some things that you've seen now that you wish you knew going into owning your own clinic? So that's question one. And then what are some things that you wouldn't do again as you kind of start up the Austin clinic and things like that? Like things that you know are either just time sucks and you can outsource that in a much quicker way, or, what are some of those kinds of things like time suckers that you would never do again and something that, is a real wow factor in those first 4 months?
Sure. Um, time suckers, I would say this is actually a lesson that I learned, I think, by doing it fairly well on the front end. So after one thing that I've been fairly good at the clinics where I've worked is building up a pretty good source of note and L coding templates.
Mm,
I hate taking a long time to do my notes and my L codes. I want to get them done as quickly as possible. So
yeah.
we use Nimble as our like
Okay.
EM platform, and so I before we even started seeing patients, or in the first month or two when we really weren't seeing very many at all, I took a good amount of time to create note templates and L coding templates.
Smart.
So that now I was almost positive that it would be a big time sucker, like you're talking about.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so I tried to prevent that by front loading a lot of that. Now,
Mhm.
I didn't do all of them, so now when I see a new patient, like, a transfemoral amputee, for example, I'll go into
Mhm.
my templates and I'll realize, "Oh, I didn't make a template for a transfemoral amputee,
Mhm.
evaluation," and then I'm kicking myself because I have to make it when like, right after I see the patient. Of
Yeah.
course, it's good because I know I'll never have to do it again, I just do it
Yeah.
once. But the more I'm very, very grateful that I did that to
Yeah.
start. It just saves time later.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a huge one for sure.
Yeah, so that was really big. One of the other things I would say, as far as getting stuff for the clinic,
Yeah.
um, of course, coming from like ottobock, where a lot of the stuff, tools and machines and everything that we got, it not all of it was super cheap, and a lot of it came from traditional, suppliers like Cascade or
Sure.
whatever. That's not always necessary. I mean,
Mm,
so what I mean is, like, a lot of the tools that I got for both of our clinics are from Harbor Freight, which is like, it's not a top tier
yeah.
tools, whatever, but the tools work, it's
Right.
fun. And so, as far as like a grinder, so I got like a good solid full hour router grinder, right?
Okay.
For my Bastrop clinic. We just opened up the South Austin clinic, and I was like, I don't think I need, first of all, I don't have the space for it. The clinic is smaller, and I don't think I need this full on, 5 grand
Yeah.
practically grinder in this other clinic. So I got a benchtop grinder, and I'm having an arm machined that will
Okay.
attach to the router, and that's going to serve as our grinder, and it'll probably work pretty
Mhm.
darn well. And
Yeah.
so I guess what I'm getting at is, especially in the startup phase, you don't have to spend a ton of money on the best of the best tools and
Mhm.
equipment. I guess that's what
Yeah.
I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah. Save it where until you
yeah,
actually need it. Like I saw
yeah.
somebody
On
else
Amazon,
share. Yeah, I saw someone else share that they got like a swivel chair
yeah.
from
My
an
friend Gary,
automotive. Yeah. And it's got
right?
all the little doodads where you can put stuff and you don't have to go wheeling around your entire office. It's all right there.
Yeah,
But it's not necessarily, it's like when you whenever you throw wedding or baby in front of something, it's super expensive. Well, this doesn't have O and P in front of it. It's just for automotive folks, but they also use
who
a,
cares?
a ton of tools and it does the job. Um, so so what's like the patient population that you're hoping to see at these locations? I know on your website it says lower limb prosthetics and orthotics. What are you starting out who are you starting out with in terms of the patients that you're seeing now, and then who are you trying to get to grow to really expand the offering?
Sure. So in the Bastrop area, the patient population here, it's a little bit more rural, and
Okay.
so it's more of a geriatric population. So a lot of Medicare patients,
Mm,
and it's a lot of AFOs for drop foot, transtibial, transfemoral prosthetics. So far in this area, that's the majority of what we've seen.
okay.
Um, with our South Austin clinic, um, we're starting to see more pediatric patients there,
Okay.
or
Nice.
pediatric orthotics specifically. So some of the referral sources that I knew here in Austin before starting the clinic, um, I did a lot of pediatric orthotics before, and so they know me for that especially.
Mhm.
And so so we're starting to see more of that in the South Austin clinic.
Gotcha.
But of course, as far as different types of patients, we would love to see more prosthetic patients.
Yeah.
Um, but same with scoliosis. So I'm certified as a WCR clinician.
Okay.
So for the Wood Chanel Rigo scoliosis brace, and I'm the only one here in Austin. So that's another one we're kind of a
That's
draw.
huge.
Yeah, so we're a draw for those patients as well. So when patients want a WCR brace, I'm kind of I'm kind of the guy in this area.
Mhm.
So that's another one as well that we're seeing more of.
Okay. No, that's great. I mean, it's like I said earlier, there's a need for more options for people, right?
Yeah.
Wherever they may be. Um, what are you uh what are you hoping to do differently than what you've seen at some of these other places that you've worked at, all these learnings that you've taken away? What are you hoping to carry over? I know we talked about the custom AFOs and kind of getting into that side of things more, even though you've thankfully had a chance to really continue to dabble. But what are you hoping to see and do differently? at your facilities.
Sure. And so that's kind of the funny thing. It's fortunately at the previous clinics where I've worked, I've been able to practice in the way that I have wanted to.
That's great.
So, which is great. So, frankly, I don't know if I would say that I'm necessarily trying to reinvent the wheel as far
Mhm.
as clinical practice. One
Meshing
thing,
all the good things together.
yeah, at each place where I've worked, I've learned lots of great things, and yeah, I really am just trying to put it all together. One thing that we are very passionate about is patient education.
Mm,
So we try
right.
to do our best to, when we do evaluations and fittings, we do our best to educate patients about their condition and about how our treatment program is or treatment plan is helping to address their condition.
Mhm.
We also emphasize a lot multidisciplinary care. So we
Right.
we interface a lot with physical therapists, OTs, physicians. I mean, I know everyone does, but we try to listen to what they're doing and we try to make sure that our plan meshes with their plan well and
Mhm.
we're not like I don't
Yeah.
know. In some clinics I've worked in the past, and it's not necessarily the fault of the clinics, but I've worked with therapists or physicians and it's been a little bit more contentious
Yeah.
where like we're kind of at odds as far as what we want to
Who's
accomplish for the
right?
patient,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
that's not great. Like
Right.
no one needs that. No, that doesn't help the patient. So that's
Right.
one thing I would say that we focus on as well.
Gotcha. No, that's it's all noble and honorable stuff, and it's good that you're taking this leap of faith and taking this on by yourself, and obviously with a growing team behind you to support and run these clinics and offer these services to those that need them. As we kind of circle the wagons here and close things out, is there anything that you want to leave the listeners with? It may be somebody that is considering opening a clinic, right? It may be a new amputee that is looking for somewhere to go, or somebody that knows somebody. So it can be a variety of things. But is there anything that perhaps we didn't talk about or touch on that you want to leave people with before we wrap up?
Sure. I think one of the main things that I have learned from this process is it does take a lot of work.
Mm,
And so, but one of the reasons that I want to do this is that I really do care about my patients and I want to provide the best care that I can. And
sure.
so I guess my advice to clinicians that are thinking about doing their own thing or just as far as just advice for clinicians in general would be to not shy away from hard work. Um,
Yeah.
and and for even for a new amputee or someone who recently had a stroke or some type of condition that's making ambulate getting around more difficult and it's really
Yeah.
affecting their mobility, don't shy away from doing the hard work um, to get through it.
Yeah.
I Yes, it's been really hard and family and I have had to make some sacrifices, but so far things when you are able to make good connections with with other clinicians and when you try not to burn bridges, um, good things happen and they just tend to work out.
Yeah.
We've been very fortunate that way.
No, that's awesome. It is a small uh, community and small industry, and but we are definitely mighty. That's for sure.
Indeed.
So if people want to find out more about you, they can find you on LinkedIn, or they can go to writo-p.com as it's been scrolling on the bottom. But thank you for joining me today, taking some time out of your precious time to kind of share what you've seen and learned with anybody that may be listening in. We have one more webinar coming up this month with Dankmeyer, and we'll kind of close this clinic series out with somebody that's been around for 70 years. So it'll be interesting to see what they've learned and how they've ebbed and flowed, and, you know, kind of all the different transitions that have happened in the last 70 years in terms of technology. But Ben, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it.
No problem.
And, you know, good luck with everything. And
Thank
I'm
you.
sure, hopefully, you know, the people come and they seek you out for everything that they need. So
Much appreciated.
have a great one. And once you start your podcast, I will be the first to listen. So let us all know when that kicks off for sure.
Will do. Will do.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And have a great rest of your day. Okay.